I had to flee the state with my newborn to escape my husband's mother. My mother-in-law has always believed I was beneath her son. It wasn't a secret. It was a fact she made sure I was aware of at every opportunity. She's the type of woman who speaks in a sickly sweet tone that barely conceals a layer of pure venom. She's called me a gold digger at my own birthday dinner, a dinner during which I was the one picking up the check for her overpriced sea base. I remember the look on her face when the waiter brought the bill to me, a flicker of annoyance that her jab hadn't landed, quickly replaced by a serene smile as she thanked me for the lovely meal. She threw a full-blown tantrum in the middle of a crowded jewelry store over my engagement ring, which at a modest $2,500, she deemed far too expensive for someone of my station. She loudly questioned my husband's judgment, embarrassing him in front of strangers while I just stood there, my hand feeling heavy and tainted. Her tactics were a constant, petty war of attrition designed to wear me down. One time, in what I can only describe as a move of breathtaking audacity, she went into my closet while I was at work and replaced several of my professional, designer-label blouses with cheap Walmart knockoffs. She must have spent hours finding near-identical patterns. When I came home and noticed the scratchy fabric and crooked seams, she feigned shock and concern. "Oh, dear," she'd said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I suppose when you're not used to nice things, it's hard to tell the difference." She then used it as proof to my husband that I was only with him for his money, that I had no real taste of my own. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. But my husband, bless him, loved me, and he saw through most of her games. He made it clear to her, time and again, that I was the woman he was going to spend his life with, and that was never going to change. The day he finally said that to her with an air of finality, I saw a look in her eye. Something shifted. The petty dislike hardened into something much colder, much more calculating. That was when the game changed. A week later, I started seeing the same unremarkable gray sedan everywhere I went. It was parked across the street from my office building in the morning, idling near the entrance to my gym in the afternoon, and a few spaces away from me at the grocery store in the evening. At first, I dismissed it as a coincidence. But after a week, the pattern was undeniable. I told my husband I thought I was being followed, but he just wrapped his arms around me and told me I was probably just stressed from his mother's latest antics. He brushed it off as paranoia. He didn't want to believe his mother was capable of something so sinister. I almost started to believe him. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I came home from work to find a thick manila folder sitting squarely in the middle of our coffee table. My husband wasn't home yet. I opened it and my blood ran cold. It was a private investigator's report, a meticulously documented log of the last 3 months of my life. Every meeting, every coffee run with a coworker, every trip to the bank, it was all there, complete with grainy photos and captions that twisted every innocent action into something suspicious. My male coworker, James, bought me a coffee on a Tuesday morning. The report noted, subject meeting with unidentified male. Displays of affection observed. My regular deposits of my own paycheck into my own savings account. Subject making frequent trips to the bank. Possible evidence of a secret, hidden account where she is stashing husband's money. The report was designed for me to find it. It wasn't for my husband. It was a warning shot fired directly at me. Her next attack was more public, designed for maximum humiliation. It happened at Easter dinner. The whole family was there, and I was trying my best to be cordial. I was helping clear the dinner plates when my mother-in-law, who I'll just call MIL, let out a theatrical shriek that made everyone jump. My bracelet. My grandmother's bracelet. It's gone. She made a huge, dramatic show of looking for it, patting her pockets, looking under the table, her voice rising in panic. Then, she fixed her gaze on me and announced with grim determination that we should all check our purses, just in case. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. And there it was, of course, coiled like a silver snake at the bottom of my bag. I watched my husband's face as she pulled it out, and I saw it, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was only there for a second before he shook his head, but that single second broke something deep inside me. Emile graciously announced she wouldn't press charges because we all make mistakes, her voice dripping with false magnanimity, while the rest of the family stared at me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoe. 2 weeks later, she invited me to lunch. Part of me, the naive, hopeful part, thought that maybe, just maybe, she was going to apologize. I should have known better. We hadn't even ordered when she slid a check for $50,000 across the table. I just stared at it, speechless. When I didn't move, she tore it up with a sigh and wrote a new one for $75,000, then another for $100,000. Every woman has a price, she said, her voice low and full of contempt. Name yours. It will be easier for everyone if you just disappear. She even had the audacity to lean in and tell me that she'd done this successfully with his other girlfriends, and that, for what it was worth, I wasn't even the prettiest gold digger he'd ever dated. The grand finale of her campaign to destroy my marriage came at a family dinner in September. For the 2 weeks leading up to it, Emile had been suspiciously, unnervingly sweet, which should have been a massive red flag waving in my face. After dinner, she suggested with a bright smile that we all share photos from a recent family beach trip and connected her phone to the big screen TV in the living room. The first few pictures were normal sunsets, group shots, my nieces and nephews playing in the sand. Then suddenly, there I was on the screen, kissing another man. It was a whole slideshow. Photos of me with this complete stranger at fancy restaurants I'd never been to, laughing intimately outside hotels I'd never seen. The Photoshop job was good, but it wasn't perfect. If you looked closely, the shadows were all wrong, the lighting was off. But in that moment, with the entire family staring in shocked silence at the giant, damning images, nobody cared about the technical details. She launched into a tearful, Oscar-worthy speech about protecting her son, about a mother's instinct, and how she'd already done him the favor of showing these photos to his friends and coworkers to warn them about his cheating, deceitful wife. I tried to defend myself, to explain that it was fake, but the damage was done. She had primed her audience perfectly. The walk to my car that night, with the venomous whispers of the whole family following me, was the longest, most humiliating walk of my entire life. On the silent, agonizing drive home, my husband, his face pale and drawn, turned to me and said the words I'd been dreading. "I need some space to think." That was it. That was the moment I finally, truly understood. She would never, ever stop. This wasn't just about her not liking me. Destroying me had become her purpose, a core part of her identity. I sat in my car in our driveway, watching my husband walk into our house without me, and something inside me hardened. I made a decision. If she wanted to play with family secrets, then we would play. But we would be playing by my rules now. The very next day, I hired my own private investigator. I told him to dig into her past, every dark and dusty corner of it. It took him 2 months, but what he found was a goldmine. It turned out her husband's nephew, my husband's cousin, looked absolutely nothing like his supposed father. But he did have Emile's distinctive sharp nose and her exact, piercing green eyes. The timeline was what sealed it. Emile had supposedly given birth to her first child 6 months prematurely, a miracle baby. But a little digging into official birth records showed the cousin was actually 6 months older than that. The affair that produced him had happened while her husband, my father-in-law, was away on an extended business trip to Europe. She had passed off her own brother-in-law's child as her own, a secret she had kept for over 30 years. With this information tucked away, I spent the next few months playing the part of the defeated, apologetic daughter-in-law. I cried and apologized for the misunderstanding with the photos. I thanked her profusely, with tears in my eyes, for forgiving me and for convincing my husband to take me back. I played the role so convincingly that by Thanksgiving, she was practically preening, basking in her victory. That's when I planted the seed for my revenge. I suggested a fun family activity for the upcoming Christmas gathering. You know, I said with my most cheerful voice, those ancestry DNA tests are so popular right now. Wouldn't it be just amazing to trace our family's incredible bloodline and heritage? I played right into her obsession with family prestige and legacy. She couldn't possibly refuse without looking suspicious. Christmas morning was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive warfare. I handed out beautifully wrapped 23andMe kits to everyone in the family, including my husband's uncle and cousin. Emile forced a tight, brittle smile, but I could see the sheer, unadulterated panic flash in her eyes. The next 2 months were delicious agony for her and pure, delicious anticipation for me. The family group chat was buzzing with excitement as everyone got their results, sharing their ancestry percentages and discovering long-lost relatives. And then, finally, the bomb dropped. The cousin got his results back. They showed a half-sibling match with my husband. The group chat went silent. I was at my father-in-law's house when he saw it. He just stared at his computer screen, his face a mask of utter confusion as he tried to process what he was seeing. Other family members started frantically comparing their results, confirming the match. The science was cold, hard, and undeniable. Emile tried to claim the test was wrong, a factory mistake, but science doesn't lie the way she does. Watching her perfectly curated family image shatter in real time as she babbled desperate, nonsensical explanations was the most exquisitely satisfying moment of my life. Her husband moved out within a week. The divorce papers cited adultery and fraud. The family imploded, splitting into factions, with most of them cutting her off completely for her decades of hypocrisy and deceit. My husband apologized over and over again, ashamed for ever having doubted me. Family dinners, what was left of them, moved to our house. She was no longer welcome. I thought I'd won. I thought it was finally blessedly over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Then my birth control, which I had been meticulously careful with, failed. The The positive pregnancy test was followed almost immediately by a bouquet of funereal-looking lilies delivered to my office. The card simply read, "Congratulations. Grandmother knows." A few minutes later, an untraceable text buzzed on my phone. "You took my family. Now I'll take what grows inside you and raise it right. Blood is blood." My victory had been a battle. She was planning a war, and my unborn child was the territory she intended to conquer. The walls of my office suddenly felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my purse, mumbled an excuse to my coworker, and ran out. The drive home was a blur of paranoia. Every car in my rearview mirror was a threat. Every turn was an attempt to shake a tail I couldn't even be sure was there. I got home, deadbolt the door, and drew all the curtains, sinking onto the bathroom floor with the pregnancy test still clutched in my hand. That's where my husband found me 20 minutes later. I didn't have to say anything. I just showed him the text. I watched his face cycle through shock, fear, and then settle on a deep, cold rage I had never seen in him before. He called his mother immediately, but she didn't answer. A moment later, his phone buzzed. A message from her, bubbly and cheerful. "Congratulations on the baby. I can't wait to be involved every single step of the way. We're going to have so much fun." That night, our home transformed into a fortress. We installed new locks, a full security system with cameras covering every angle. My husband took an emergency leave from work to stay with me. We changed our routines, shopping at different stores, taking different routes to the few places we had to go. But she was always one step ahead. Packages started arriving at our door with no return address, a top-of-the-line crib, a ridiculously expensive high chair, all impossible to trace. Her psychological warfare escalated with terrifying speed. She somehow got my work email address and sent out a blast to my entire office, cheerfully announcing my pregnancy before I'd even had my first doctor's appointment. My boss pulled me aside to discuss my maternity leave plans while I was still reeling from the news myself. She had stolen my chance to share my own joy on my own terms. Then came the medical interference. I arrived at my first prenatal appointment only to be told by the confused receptionist that I had just called to cancel. It took us an hour of frantic calls and identity verification to get the appointment reinstated and to set up password protection on my medical files. She had been impersonating me, trying to get access to my most private information. My husband confronted her at her apartment. I waited in the car, my stomach in knots, watching their angry, silent pantomime through her living room window. She just stood there smiling that serene, infuriating smile, denying everything. When he came back to the car, his hands were shaking with fury. She had already decorated a full nursery in her spare room. She'd picked out names. And she calmly informed him that she had already been consulting with lawyers about her legal rights as a grandparent. The family, or what was left of it, was split. Some relatives thought we were overreacting, that this was just a grandmother's misguided excitement. Others, who had seen her destroy enough lives, knew better. Her tactics grew bolder. She'd show up at my workplace with lavish baby gifts, forcing me to either accept them in front of my colleagues or look like a petty, ungrateful monster. She joined every online pregnancy group and forum I was a part of, always commenting on my posts with cheerful, grandmotherly advice, always finding me no matter how many times I changed my username. The breaking point came during my second trimester. I'd been so careful. But somehow, she learned about my doctor's appointment. As I sat in the waiting room, she walked in, sat down right beside me, and casually picked up a parenting magazine as if we were meeting for coffee. When the nurse called my name, she stood up too. The nurse looked confused. And Miles sweetly explained that she was here to support her daughter-in-law. I firmly told them she was not allowed in my appointment. She made a scene, her voice rising, wailing about being cruelly excluded from her grandchild's life, loud enough for the entire waiting room to hear. Security had to escort her out while she sobbed about just wanting to be involved. That night, my husband and I knew we had to change our strategy from defense to offense. We started documenting everything, every text, every unwanted gift, every creepy appearance. We installed more cameras, changed all our passwords, and put alerts on our credit reports. But she adapted. The gifts started coming to my husband's work instead. She befriended our elderly neighbors, always asking about me, expressing her deep concern for my health. She started volunteering at the hospital where I planned to deliver, getting herself a position on the auxiliary board. Every move we made, she countered. Then, we discovered her newest, most terrifying plan through pure accident. CB, my husband's cousin and her secret son, had grown completely disgusted with her after learning the truth and reached out to help us. He'd overheard her on the phone with someone, discussing nursing homes and how to obtain power of attorney. She was actively researching how to have me declared mentally incompetent due to pregnancy-related mental health issues. The revelation sent ice through my veins. Her endgame wasn't just to be involved, it was to remove me entirely. I immediately scheduled an appointment with my obstetrician to document my mental health status, creating a paper trail of my stability. CB proved to be an invaluable double agent. He started visiting his mother regularly, pretending to reconcile while actually gathering intelligence. Through him, we learned she'd been consulting with a psychiatrist friend about the symptoms of postpartum psychosis, clearly planning to use this angle against me after the birth. She'd even researched which judges in our area were most sympathetic to grandparent rights cases. One day, I woke to find our mailbox stuffed with brochures for adoption agencies. The message was clear. She wanted me to doubt my own ability to be a mother. The 8th month brought a terrifying escalation. I was home alone when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a business suit holding official-looking documents. She identified herself as a social worker from Child Protective Services, responding to an anonymous concern about an at-risk pregnancy. Someone had reported that I was showing signs of severe mental distress and might be a danger to my unborn child. My hands shook as I called my husband, who rushed home from work. The social worker was professional but thorough. She found nothing concerning, of course, but the visit itself became part of an official record. And Maëlle had found a way to involve the authorities, to plant a seed of doubt in the system, without ever directly implicating herself. My husband's relationship with his mother reached its final breaking point. He drove to her apartment one evening, returning hours later looking emotionally drained and utterly defeated. She'd spent the entire time playing the victim, crying, showing him the perfectly decorated nursery and even the brand new car seat she'd installed in her vehicle, just in case of emergencies. Her delusion was so complete that she genuinely believed she was the wronged party in all of this. As my due date approached, the stress became unbearable. We discovered she'd been volunteering at the hospital's maternity ward for months, ingratiating herself with the staff, becoming a beloved fixture. We couldn't deliver there. We toured facilities in neighboring towns, finding one where she had no connections. The logistics were a nightmare, but it felt like our only option. The night before my due date, my husband checked the nursery camera feed and saw a package on the windowsill outside, somehow placed there without triggering our motion sensors. Inside was a hand-knitted blanket and a note, made with love for my grandchild. Soon, labor began at dawn on a Tuesday. We executed our escape plan like a covert operation. We took a circuitous route to the new hospital, checking constantly for followers. We had registered under an alias. The hospital security had her photo and strict instructions. Our daughter was born at 11:47 p.m., perfect and healthy. Holding her for the first time, I felt a wave of overwhelming love and fierce protectiveness. She was here, she was ours, and I would do anything to keep her safe. Our peace lasted less than 48 hours. On our second night, hospital security intercepted Maëlle in the parking garage. She'd been circling the hospital for hours, somehow knowing we were there. The next morning, she managed to get a gift basket left outside our room. She knew where we were. We decided to leave the hospital early. My husband pulled the car around to a side entrance while security created a distraction. We bundled our daughter into her car seat and slipped out unnoticed, feeling like fugitives. When we got home, we found fresh flowers on our doorstep and a package from an expensive baby boutique. Our security cameras showed she'd been there at 3 a.m., carefully avoiding the motion sensors she'd apparently mapped out. That night, sitting in our fortified house, surrounded by evidence of her relentless obsession, we made the hardest decision of our lives. We would move, not just to another neighborhood, but out of state. My husband started secretly job hunting in cities where we had no connections, no family, no history. It meant leaving the few people in our support system, but staying had become untenable. We began planning our escape like a military operation. We couldn't use traditional movers. Friends who we trusted implicitly helped us pack in the middle of the night, loading a rental truck in shifts. We left most of our furniture behind. The hardest part was leaving without saying goodbye. Any leak of information could potentially reach my mother-in-law through the family grapevine. We left letters with Victoria to distribute after we were already gone. On our last night, I walked through our empty house, holding our sleeping daughter. This wasn't how I had imagined starting our family life. But as I looked at her peaceful face, I knew we were making the only choice we could. We left at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. My husband checked the mirrors constantly while I sat in the back, watching our daughter. Every car that followed us for more than a few exits made our hearts pound. But gradually, mile by mile, as the sun rose over a state we didn't recognize, the tension began to ease. We arrived at our new, small rental house exhausted, but hopeful. As we carried our daughter across the threshold, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. The first few weeks were chaos, but it was a normal, new parent chaos. Without the constant threat of her presence, we could finally just enjoy our baby. My husband thrived in his new job. I joined a local mothers group, using only my first name, and slowly began to build a new support network. We maintained total information security. Victoria served as our go-between with the few family members we trusted. Through her, we learned that Amiel had hired another private investigator to find us, but this time, we'd covered our tracks too well. 6 months after we left, Victoria visited, using careful counter-surveillance to make sure she wasn't followed. She told us that without us as a target, Amiel's instability had become impossible to hide. Her most loyal supporters were distancing themselves. Several family members had reached out to Victoria to apologize, saying they finally understood and were sorry for not believing us sooner. Her lawyer had dropped her. The grandparent support groups had ostracized her for being too extreme. As our daughter's first birthday approached, I reflected on everything we'd lost: our home, our community, our proximity to loving family. But we had gained something invaluable: freedom. We celebrated quietly, just the three of us, with a small cake and a few presents. As I watched our daughter smash pink frosting into her hair, giggling with a pure, unadulterated joy that had been bought at such a high price, I knew every single sacrifice had been worth it. She would grow up knowing only healthy, unconditional love, never experiencing the psychological warfare that had nearly destroyed us. My husband and I had survived, our bond forged in the fire of a shared adversity. We had won, not by fighting fire with fire, but by choosing peace over proximity, anonymity over anxiety. In our new life, we were just another family in a quiet neighborhood. No drama, no stalking, no war. Just the beautiful, exhausting, perfect normalcy of raising a child in peace. And that was everything.